Have you ever walked through a pristine, freshly painted house and just wondered what dark, expensive secrets might be lurking right behind that perfect drywall?
Oh, all the time. I mean, it's this illusion of perfection.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
you could just step into an open house, you smell the fresh carpet, you see the gleaming countertops, and it all just feels so safe.
Yeah, but that cosmetic surface is incredibly good at hiding the truth. We rely heavily on our naked eye to evaluate a property, assuming that, if the paint is fresh and the floors are level, the structure is sound.
Which is totally understandable.
Right. But a house is essentially a complex machine, and machines have hidden internal stresses that a fresh coat of paint can just easily mask.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We are exploring the high-stakes, highly technical world of forensic property inspection.
It is a fascinating world, too.
It really is. And we're looking at a stack of incredibly revealing sources today. We've got an actual real-world property inspection report for a home in Alvin, Texas.
Yeah, that report is eye-opening.
Plus, we have a technical forensic analysis white papers on building diagnostics, equipment guides from a thermal imaging company called MileZ Tools, and expert insights from Hawaii Water Damage Restoration, as well as a firm called Secured Inspections.
It's a really compelling collection because it bridges the gap between theoretical building science, the pure physics of how materials behave, and the harsh practical realities of the real estate market.
Right. The ultimate goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to unpack how military-grade technology and the laws of thermodynamics are being used to perform what industry insiders call the $1 end save.
Rescuing home buyers from invisible financial disasters.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. To understand how we find these hidden disasters, we first have to understand the science of seeing the invisible.
Yeah, we're moving far beyond the traditional image of an inspector with a flashlight and a clipboard just like poking at baseboards. We're entering the realm of infrared thermography.
Let's break that down. Infrared thermography, essentially thermal cameras, right?
Right.
But how do they actually work in a house? Because I feel like people think they're just taking a magic picture of water inside a wall.
What's fascinating here is that they do not see water at all.
Wait, they don't?
Not at all. What they detect is the intensity of infrared radiation, and then they convert those signals into a visible electronic image called a thermogram.
Okay.
It all goes back to the underlying physics, specifically the Stefan Boltzmann law.
Hold on, we're jumping straight into the physics here. Let's make sure I'm following. What does the Stefan Boltzmann law actually tell us about, say, a living room?
Well, the law establishes the mathematical relationship between the total power radiated by what physicists call a black body and its absolute temperature.
Wait, what do you mean by a black body? Are we talking about the actual color of the materials in the house?
No. In physics, a black body is just a theoretical, idealized object that absorbs all electromagnetic radiation that hits it and then perfectly emits it back out.
I see.
It's like the perfect baseline for measuring heat emission. In reality, nothing is a perfect black body.
Because the real world is messy.
Exactly. All matter with a temperature above absolute zero emits infrared energy, but different building materials emit that thermal radiation with completely different levels of efficiency.
Okay.
And this is a concept called emissivity.
Emissivity, okay? So a painted piece of drywall emits its internal heat differently than, say, a brick or a piece of wood.
Precisely. Drywall actually has an emissivity of about 0.90 to 0.94, making it highly efficient at emitting thermal radiation.
So it's basically shouting its temperature at the camera.
Yes, that makes it a fantastic clear canvas for thermal mapping. When water infiltrates that highly emissive drywall, the thermal camera still isn't seeing the water itself.
Right, because you said it doesn't see water.
Exactly. It's seeing the temperature differential caused by evaporative cooling and something called thermal lag.
Okay, I understand evaporative cooling like sweating on a hot day, but what does thermal lag mean in the context of a wet wall?
It comes down to water's incredibly high specific heat capacity.
Which means what exactly?
Well, it takes 4.18 joules of energy to raise 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Dry wood, by comparison, only takes about 1.7 joules.
Oh, wow. That's a huge difference.
It is. So if a ceiling joist is wet, it can store vastly more thermal energy than the dry wood around it.
Oh, I get it. It's like a concrete patio after the sun goes down.
Yes, exactly.
The air gets cool, but the concrete just holds onto the heat for hours.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Throughout the day, as the house heats up and cools down with the weather or the HVAC system, That wet area inside the ceiling heats and cools at a completely different rate than the dry
It
materials.
lags behind.
Right, it lies behind. And when that trapped moisture evaporates, it absorbs energy, creating a localized reduction in surface temperature.
So it's basically predator vision, but for a house's sweat.
Yes.
You're looking for these cold spots, these blue or purple plumes on the thermogram that show where the house is essentially sweating out a hidden leak.
That is a very vivid mechanical way to look at it. You are hunting for the physical footprint of the moisture, not the moisture itself.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second. If the technology is just looking for cold spots or hot spots, couldn't you just jump online, buy a cheap DIY consumer-grade thermal camera for 20 bucks and walk around checking your own house?
I mean, you could.
So why pay for a forensic expert?
It's a question a lot of well-meaning homeowners ask, and honestly, it's where they often get themselves into expensive trouble.
How so?
Let's go back to that concept of emissivity. Remember how drywall has high emissivity and acts like a great canvas?
Yeah, the .94 number.
Right. Well, a shiny copper plumbing pipe has an emissivity of about 0.05.
Oh, which means it barely emits its own thermal signature at all.
Exactly. It acts like a thermal mirror. A novice walking around with a DIY thermal camera might scan their utility room, see a massive glowing hot spot on a copper pipe, and panic.
Thinking there's like an imminent electrical fire or a boiling leak?
Right, but in reality, that copper pipe is just reflecting the heat signature of the light bulb right behind the person holding the camera.
Oh, wow. So you could be tearing open a wall for literally no reason, chasing a reflection of your own body heat or a light fixture.
Yeah, or conversely, you might see a cool streak on the ceiling and assume it's a massive water leak, when really it's just a thermal bypass.
A thermal bypass.
Yeah, like a missing chunk of insulation letting a draft of cold air in from the attic. True forensic professionals never rely on the camera alone.
That makes sense.
They always pair the thermal imaging with a moisture meter to confirm. The camera says, hey, there's a thermal anomaly here, and the moisture meter physically measures the electrical resistance or dielectric properties of the drywall to confirm if that anomaly is actually saturated with water.
Got it. Now, if thermal lag and evaporation are the primary mechanisms for finding these invisible flaws, the ultimate testing ground has to be an environment where the building envelope is under constant siege by the weather. According to our sources, there are few places that test a building quite like the Texas Gulf Coast.
It is a brutal environment for a structure. When you look at areas like Galveston, Brazoria, and Houston, physics and chemistry are constantly attacking the house from every angle.
Yeah, you have high heat paired with extreme humidity.
Which leads to interstitial condensation.
Interstitial condensation.
Yeah.
That's moisture getting trapped inside the actual wall cavities rather than on the surface, right?
Correct. The subtropical climate means you have warm, moist air outside, often exceeding 80% relative humidity.
Ugh, you can basically drink the air.
Pretty much. And when that air infiltrates the building envelope and hits the back of a piece of drywall that's being cooled by the interior air conditioning, it hits its dew point.
Oh.
Yeah, it literally condenses inside the wall where it can't easily evaporate.
And thermal imaging is uniquely capable of seeing that cooling effect inside the cavity before the moisture ever bleeds through the paint.
Exactly.
But the salt air is another massive variable down there.
Oh, chloride-induced corrosion.
Sounds nasty.
It is. The high concentration of chloride ions in the coastal air acts as a catalyst, rapidly accelerating the oxidation of metals. We're talking about HVAC condensers rotting out prematurely, electrical panels corroding, and critical structural fasteners weakening.
Man. Well, the Alvin, Texas Property Inspection Report in our stack brings all of these abstract physics into the real world.
Yes, the Charles Lunhoff report.
Right. TREC license number 230070. This was for a home on South Beauregard Street. And reading the sequence of damage in this report, it's like looking at an X-ray of a misaligned human spine.
That's a great analogy.
And once the lower back goes out, it pulls the shoulders down and misaligns the neck. The whole skeleton is connected.
It perfectly illustrates the chain reaction of failure. A house is a dynamic, interconnected system. A failure at the base transmits stress all the way to the top.
Let's trace that domino effect found at the Alvin house. It starts entirely outside the footprint of the home. The report notes poor grading and disturbed ground in the yard, leading to standing water around the perimeter.
Which seems like a minor landscaping issue that you could just fix with a shovel over the weekend.
Right, just fig a trench.
But that area sits on expansive clay soils. When that specific type of clay absorbs standing water, it swells dramatically, increasing in volume.
And then When the dry season hits, it shrinks and cracks.
Exactly. This constant, aggressive shrink-swell cycle exerts massive heaving and settling forces on the foundation.
And the report specifically documents the aftermath of that force. It notes that the masonry columns and piers in the crawl space had settled.
Yeah, there were prior repairs where someone came in with new masonry columns and shims trying to level out the major beams.
But the kinetic energy had already traveled upward into the framing.
When the foundation moves, it racks the entire frame of the house above it. The geometry of the wooden skeleton is just forced out of square.
And this is where human nature works against us, right?
No, definitely.
Because the inspector found doorways in the living room and laundry area that were completely racked. Doors weren't latching properly or swinging open by themselves.
Right, and as a homeowner, your first instinct is to just push the door harder.
Yeah, or maybe take a sander to the bottom of the door frame. You assume the door is the problem while completely ignoring that the ground beneath you is literally heaving.
The cosmetic fix masks the structural failure, and the structural stress at the Alvin house didn't stop at the doors.
No, it went further up.
The foundation movement damaged the major fireplace footings, causing settling that physically cracked the masonry in the middle living room. The rigid materials shatter when the flexible wood framing twists.
And the spine analogy continues all the way up to the roof frame. A shifted foundation means the roof geometry is compromised.
Yep. The inspector used a drone to view the roof and spotted a major issue on the rear exterior kitchen roof.
The report details a low slope where two large rises pool into a single valley that drains right next to a turret.
Because the slope is too low, the water doesn't shed quickly enough during a heavy Gulf Coast downpour. It pools.
It just sits there.
The report noted granule loss in vulnerable areas in the asphalt shingles right in that valley.
So you have standing water finding its way under the shingles, and this is where physics actively fights the house again through capillary action.
Yes, capillary action is the ability of a liquid to flow in narrow spaces without the assistance of, or even in opposition to, external forces like gravity.
It's like dipping the corner of a paper towel into a spill. The water defies gravity and climbs up the paper towel.
It does the exact same thing with the structural timber around that turret. The water wicks deep into the wood fibers, staying damp long after the rain stops.
And the report explicitly states this increased water penetration, quote, may be causing rot around the turret.
And that wet, rotting wood doesn't just compromise the physical strength of the house, it creates a biological beacon for the local wildlife.
Oh, the Formosan subterranean termites.
Yes. They are a massive, aggressive threat in the Gulf Coast, and their biology dictates that they absolutely require a constant moisture source to survive.
They cannot live in dry wood.
No. A wet, rotting roof valley caused by a sagging foundation is a perfect, insulated habitat for them.
And the thermal cameras come back into play here, don't they? Termites aren't just eating the wood. They are generating a thermal footprint.
They are. Formosan termites live in colonies that can number in the millions. Inside their guts, they have a complex microbiome of protozoa and bacteria that break down the cellulose in the wood.
That is wild.
Yeah, and that digestive process, combined with the friction of millions of insect bodies moving tightly together, generates a significant amount of metabolic heat.
Like a living heater inside the wall.
Exactly. An infrared camera can pick up the heat signature of a termite nest radiating right through the drywall.
Okay, so termites are a biological threat eating the house in slow motion. But the Alvin report also flags mechanical issues that can destroy a home in minutes.
Right. We have to look at the instantaneous, catastrophic threats.
Because the battlefield mindset of forensic inspection requires pivoting from the slow decay of moisture to the immediate danger of electrical and chemical hazards.
Yes, and there is a terrifying detail in the Alvin report regarding the electrical system. The inspector found an obsolete Federal Pacific Electric, or FPE, stab lock service panel on the rear exterior wall.
Finding an FPE panel is a major red flag for any inspector, right?
Huge red flag. They are notorious within the industry because they have a documented, incredibly high failure rate regarding their core safety function.
Which is tripping the breaker.
Exactly. They often fail to trip under a heavy load or during a short circuit. The internal mechanisms can literally just seize up.
Meaning, instead of cutting the power to prevent an overload, The breaker just stays closed, letting the wires heat up inside the walls until the insulation melts and ignites.
They're a well-documented fire hazard. And this is another area where thermal imaging moves from finding water leaks to potentially life-saving diagnostics.
The forensic approach is to scan that electrical panel with the thermal camera while the house is under a heavy electrical load, right?
Yes.
So you turn on the air conditioning, run the dryer, turn on the oven.
You force the electrical system to work hard. What the inspector is looking for is an internal heat bloom.
Or a heat bloom.
Yeah. Before an FPE breaker catastrophically fails and starts a fire, the internal contacts often begin to arc slightly or oxidize due to resistance.
Oh, I see.
This resistance creates a highly localized, intense heat signature. The thermal camera can see that specific breaker glowing white-hot on the thermogram.
So you're identifying an imminent fire hazard before a single spark is visible to the naked eye.
Precisely.
But a heat bloom tells you about a threat generating its own energy. What about hazards that sit completely dormant? Let's pivot to chemical hazards, specifically lead-based paint.
A critical health issue for any housing stock built prior to 1978.
Our sources highlight how dangerous lead dust is, especially for the neurological development of children. But finding it presents a massive diagnostic problem.
It does.
I mean, it sounds like we need an MRI for the walls. If lead paint was applied to a living room wall in 1965, and it's now buried under 20 layers of new, safe latex paint, how do we find it? You can't just scrape the walls down to the bare studs in the middle of a home showing to test the bottom layer.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, traditional chemical swab tests are often inaccurate for this exact reason. They require destructive scraping to physically expose the deep layers to the chemical agent.
Which sellers definitely don't want you doing.
Right. So the forensic solution is a non-destructive piece of technology called an XRF analyzer.
X-ray fluorescence.
It is essentially a portable nuclear physics. The XRF device shoots a highly controlled, targeted beam of high-energy electromagnetic radiation X-rays directly into the wall.
Let's break down the mechanics of that. Think of a lead atom like a packed stadium,
Right.
with electrons occupying specific rows or shells around the center.
Okay, I like this.
The X-ray acts like a rogue baseball that comes flying in and knocks an electron right out of the front row, the inner shell.
Yes, and that inner vacancy makes the atom highly unstable.
So if you knock an inner electron out, the atom is unstable. Something has to fill that gap to restore balance.
An electron from an outer row immediately drops down to fill the empty seat in the inner shell.
Like someone moving up to the better seats.
Exactly. But as that electron makes the drop to a lower energy state, it has to release its excess energy. That burst of released energy is a fluorescent X-ray.
And every element has a different stadium seating chart, so to speak.
Right. The energy signature of that fluorescent X-ray is entirely unique to the atomic structure of lead.
That is incredible.
The XRF analyzer is calibrated to detect that specific energy wavelength. It instantly counts those fluorescent bursts and provides a precise, quantitative measurement of how much lead is present.
Through 20 layers of paint, instantly, without leaving a scratch on the drywall.
And that speed completely changes the leverage a home buyer has. In the Texas real estate market, buyers typically only have a 10-day option period to do their due diligence, get inspections, and negotiate.
Oh, right.
If you use a traditional lab test for paint chips, you might wait 5 days just to get the lab results back in the mail.
Half your time is gone. The clock is ticking down to zero while you wait. With XRF, you know immediately if you are facing a massive lead abatement project, and you can renegotiate the purchase price or walk away on day 2 of your option period.
It provides actionable, empirical data when the buyer actually has the power to use it. And speaking of the timeline and leverage in coastal environments, the inspection of windstorm bonds is another critical data point the inspector is looking for.
Windstorm bonds. This brings us back to the Gulf Coast weather and the mechanics of a hurricane.
When extreme hurricane winds pass over a roof, they act very similarly to air passing over an airplane wing.
Create a lift.
Right. The wind creates an area of low pressure above the roof, which generates massive aerodynamic lift. The house is literally trying to pull its own roof off.
Terrifying.
Windstorm bonds are the mechanical connections, often metal H-clips or hurricane straps, that physically anchor the roof framing down to the wall framing to resist that uplift force.
But those metal anchors are sitting in the humid, chloride-rich salt air we talked about earlier.
Exactly. So an inspector isn't just checking to see if the clips were installed. They are checking to see if they are pitted, scaled, and weakened by chloride-induced corrosion.
Because if those bonds are compromised, not only is the house structurally unsafe in a storm,
But it may also become completely uninsurable by the Texas Windstorm Insurance Association. Finding out your new home is uninsurable after you've closed the deal is a catastrophic financial scenario.
wow. Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of all this technology, from thermodynamics to portable x-rays. It all culminates in what the forensic industry calls the $1 save.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening to this right now?
It fundamentally comes down to the economics of early detection.
Huh.
Water damage, structural decay, corrosion, these are progressive cascading failures. They get exponentially more expensive to fix the longer they go unnoticed behind the cosmetic surfaces.
And the math logged out in the Hawaii Water Damage Restoration Insights is stark. An inspector uses a thermal camera and a moisture meter and spots a tiny, cool blue plume in the attic ceiling that you would never see with your bare eyes. It's an incipient leak. You spend $500 today for a roofer to do a targeted patch.
But if you rely only on the naked eye and that leak goes undetected for a year, the water saturates the blown-in insulation.
Then capillary action pulls it deep into the structural headers.
The constant moisture breeds toxic mold. Suddenly, you aren't doing a $500 patch. You are setting up negative air pressure containment zones, physically cutting out and replacing structural timber, and paying for professional mold remediation.
A minor maintenance issue balloons into a comfy $5,000 project.
Very quickly.
The $1 save isn't necessarily about saving a literal $1 million on a single-family home, though on large commercial properties it absolutely scales to that.
Yeah.
It's about preventing the total loss of your financial capital.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that a house isn't just a static safe box that you paint every few years. It is an active, interconnected system fighting a constant daily war against thermodynamics, expansive clay, salt air, and gravity.
Well said.
By demanding rigorous technology-driven inspections, you aren't just checking a box for a mortgage lender. You are protecting your physical health and your financial future.
This raises an important question, though, about where the industry goes from here. The sources note that the field is rapidly moving toward continuous integrated monitoring.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We are looking at a near future where homes are built equipped with Internet of Things, or IoT, moisture sensors embedded directly into the wall cavities.
Interesting.
And those are paired with AI algorithms that can instantly analyze thermograms and sensor data far better than the human eye.
So the house is constantly scanning its own structural skeleton.
If the homes of the future can essentially feel their own incipient leaks through embedded sensors and automatically diagnose their own structural failures in real time using artificial intelligence,
Will the concept of the catastrophic home failure, and perhaps even the traditional point-in-time home inspection itself, eventually become entirely obsolete?
Exactly.
Man, it's a wild thought. Imagine walking through that pristine, freshly painted house we talked about at the very beginning.
Yeah.
But instead of wondering what dark, expensive secrets are lurking behind the drywall, the house just texts you a diagnostic report to tell you exactly where it hurts.
That would change everything.
Until then, though, we definitely still need the forensic experts, their moisture meters, and their thermal cameras.